Am I a sociopath? I don't know. Maybe. It was evident that his entire life, he had never belonged to anything.
On one of the cases I was assigned to, we caught a gangster that was planning to murder the single eyewitness in his case.
Called my lawyer. He was like, well, you don't have to. I was like, well, good. He's like, well, if you don't have to, they're going to throw you back in jail. And I'm like, well, bad.
And he said, I've been in and out of this jail for 15 years, and they've never caught me once on these phones. 7,000. He'd been in there for 9 months, made 7,000 phone calls. And my buddy made this offhand.
The better you get, the more you're able to form your own moral compass.
If you sold my PlayStations yet? They end up figuring out like he's not selling PlayStations. And
that's AK-47s. That's what that is. All the data every single night went on a DVD, on a spindle. I knew, hey, there's no way a human being is going to go through that stuff. Criminals, we typically are not dumbasses. Hi, I'm Brett Johnson, former United States Most Wanted criminal. In today's world, criminals come in all shapes and sizes, but they all have one thing in common. They all have criminal thoughts. On today's episode, we're going to be talking to a criminal prosecutor out of Michigan, Rory McBride, and it's a very interesting conversation. He's come up with a product that scrapes the phone calls of prisoners, and we're going to have a whole conversation about that and why a product like that is so important. Before we get started, and understand the reason I want to talk to Rory, it's really interesting. I did the Jordan Peterson podcast. It came out about 2 to 3 days ago. Rory reached out to me on LinkedIn, and of course I accepted the connection request, and then I looked at his bio, and it said something about recording prisoners' phone calls, and I remember my time behind the fence. So I was like, this guy, he might know what he's talking about. Then I looked at his bio even more in depth, and to say that he is an extraordinary human being is putting things lightly. He has an outstanding history. He has beyond professional with everything he's done, and the conversation is going to be outstanding. Before we get to that, I'm going to shoot things over to Brian. Brian, what have you got for us?
California could be on the verge of a rightward connection in criminal justice policy. Voters could get another chance to consider penalties for property and drug crimes. The state was a leader in rewriting laws to move away from harsh sentences, prolonged incarceration, and overcrowded prisons in the name of racial justice. But a new panic and the inability of law enforcement to control property crime might undermine those changes.
Well, that's interesting. Because, if you've not been watching the news lately, crime on the West Coast has went absolutely crazy. I'm in Birmingham, Alabama, and thievery, shoplifting, property crimes as a whole, they've skyrocketed, but certainly on the West Coast. And a lot of that has had to do with the lack of proper enforcement. At least that's my opinion. And here's the thing. In a utopia, in an ideal world, we wouldn't need law enforcement because everyone would be looking out for each other. Everyone would be trying to help each other. The truth of the matter is that we do not live in a utopia. We do not have an ideal world. There are predators out there. And when there are few to little consequences for illegal activities, those predators capitalize. Not only that, but you've got opportunists out there as well. If they know that they're not going to be arrested, if they know that the consequences are very, very slim or non-existent, crime tends to skyrocket. And we've seen that. I don't know what else to say about that. It's good that finally we're getting some talk about proper enforcement measures in California, hopefully up in Oregon, Washington State, things like that. Brian?
A federal judge in New York has ordered a vast unsealing of court documents that will make public the names of scores of Jeffrey Epstein's associates. The documents are part of a settled civil lawsuit alleging Epstein's one-time girlfriend Ghislaine Maxwell facilitated the sexual abuse of a minor. More than 150 people are expected to be identified in early January 2024.
150 people. You know, this thing has been going on a while. It truly has. And the thing is that it shouldn't be going on this long. It should not be going on this long. We have a list of people who were associated with Jeffrey Epstein. We've got a list of very powerful people that took those trips to Little Kitty Island. And for some reason, a lot of those names have not been released. And I don't even think it's for some reason. I think it's because the rich and powerful have enough pull to make sure that those names aren't released. That we've got 150, I think that is a great start. We just need more. We need more openness. We live in this society today where a lot of the times power and influence that absolutely causes justice to swing whichever way they want it to swing. And for this to be happening finally with these names, hopefully that is just the start of more openness when it comes to protecting our children in society. All right, so today's criminal insight. What's interesting to me is the hierarchy of crime. So once you become a criminal, once you become an established criminal, you tend to form your own kind of moral compass or moral basis, where you're willing to victimize some people and not others, or willing to commit some crimes and not others. And that allows you to justify that you are, at the end of the day, not a bad guy. This is really interesting to me because, you know, when I started my life of crime as a beginner, I can't say I really cared about the victim at any point during that at all. But as things went on, as I got better at it, see, when you're a beginner, I was always just trying to profit. So I didn't care who the victims were. I would victimize any specific person that I possibly could in order to profit. As I got better at it, I got to the point where I was like, well, you know, I won't hit individuals. I won't victimize them. I'll victimize businesses or banks. And then finally, once I reached the upper tier of things, I was like, well, you know, I won't even hit mom and pop stores or retailers. I'll hit the government instead. That's the justification that I gave. And the reason I'm talking about this today, I've been on a lot of shows recently, and I do my show as well. I've given a lot of interviews over the past several years. And there's a demographic of people that like to say that all criminals are sociopaths. Am I a sociopath? I don't know, maybe. But I do know that most criminals are not. They are not. We, and I refer to myself as a criminal, we justify our crimes. My justification when I was committing crime was I did it for my family, for my sister, for my wife, for my stripper girlfriend. And I believed those justifications. That justification allowed me to continue to act and to victimize other people. It was cognitive dissonance, absolutely. But I believed that justification. I convinced myself of that in order to tell myself, well, you know, at the end of the day, I'm a good guy. No, I was not a good guy. But this is common among most criminals that are out there. I served time with hundreds, if not thousands, of different individuals. I may have met one or two real sociopaths during that point in time. Most of those guys that I met, they would consistently try to justify their crimes. You know, I did it for my family, and they would believe that. And some people like me were fortunate enough to come to the realization, well, no, I didn't do it because of any of that. I chose to victimize people because I wanted to. And there's a big difference in that. I'm talking about the hierarchy. When you're a criminal and you become good at your craft of victimizing people and businesses, the better you get, the more you're able to form your own moral compass. And it's a very situational compass. You know, it doesn't point any way except the way that I need it to point to allow me to commit the crime that I want to commit. All right. Behind the fence, it's really not much different than that either. Guys have been arrested. They've been caught committing their crimes. And behind the fence, that hierarchy is there as well. At the bottom of the barrel, you've got those predators who victimize children and women. And at the top, you've got the white collar guys, the loan investment guys, stuff like that. And you've got the drug dealers, the traffickers, and it goes on down, depending on where you are specifically. And I just wanted people to kind of understand that hierarchy is formed as a way to say, well, at the end of the day, I'm better than this guy. I'm not as bad as this guy. And that allows that person to say, well, I'm not really that bad of a guy, because again, cognitive dissonance, you've not been listening, you've not been paying attention, you've not accepted responsibility, you've not accepted accountability. And that's the way life is behind the fence. And with that, we're going to end the Criminal Insights segment. We're going to move on to our guest. All right, today's guest is Rory McBride. He's a prosecutor out of Berrien County, Michigan. He's here to discuss a product. Well, he's here to discuss some of his history and past and what he does for a living, but also a product that he's developed that scrapes the phone calls of prisoners. And we're going to talk about why that's important. Rory, man, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, Brett, thank you so much for having me. Okay,
no,
I
absolutely.
told you off air. I'm very honored to be speaking to you. This is really cool.
No, I told you, and maybe we should have started recording back then, so we wouldn't have to repeat it. But you sent me that connection request, and I saw that your product, WireTap Tech, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and it scrapes the phone calls of prisoners, and that hit me on so many levels, because I remember trying to send out messages when I was, in jail and trying to hide evidence. I not only remember that, but I remember all these guys that were trying to run their businesses from behind the fence or while in the county jail too. And a product like you've got, when I was there, and I want to talk about the product, but before I get into that, I want to talk about some of your bio too. When I was there, if you were going to record, you would record a prisoner's phone calls, but you would have to manually listen to them back. And that takes a lot of man hours, because you've got a lot of people incarcerated.
Yeah, an example of that is the local jail we have here has got about 300 people in it.
Right.
There's over 1 million recorded phone calls annually that are processed through this jail.
And how many people work at the jail?
Less than 100.
Yeah.
I don't
so
know
there's no way you can go through them all.
Yeah, I mean, if you had 300 people listening day in and day out, it would be a full-time job.
Right. So let me ask you, and we're going to move over into that, but I want to make sure everyone knows who you are. I was reading your bio. You went to UCLA, law school.
Yes.
Now, first one in the family to do that, or what? Tell me about this.
Yeah, so I'm the first lawyer in my family. My mom was a doctor. My dad ran a business when I was younger, but then he actually stayed home to homeschool us growing up. So me and my three younger siblings were homeschooled growing up in Alaska. And
how was Alaska?
I absolutely loved it. I mean, it was a beautiful place to grow up. And you were more worried about bears than you were about people. I mean,
so where in Alaska, man? Because I've never been.
Yeah, so I grew up in Eagle River, Alaska, which is
okay.
Just 10 miles north of Anchorage, like the more popular city. So Eagle River is almost like a suburb a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it was a beautiful place to grow up. I mean, you spent lots and lots of time outside, got to do lots of fishing, stuff like that. I mean, a lot of my favorite memories growing up are staying out fishing because the sun's out all night. So you'd stay out fishing at 2 a.m, catching fish and stuff like that. So yeah, I didn't think it was a unique experience because that was all I knew. And then
dude, I would love that.
Yeah, I would come down to like the lower 48, as we called it, for like wrestling tournaments and things like that.
Right.
And kids would be like, "Wow, do you like ride polar bears and stuff?" You definitely didn't, because they would eat you. So
let me ask you. I've got a couple of friends that live up there, and they tell me that the mosquitoes are size of your hand. Is that true or not?
We joke that it's the Alaska state bird.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Some of the places we would go dip netting up in the interior Alaska during like July. If you weren't wearing like a complete face mask, you couldn't breathe because you'd be inhaling mosquitoes.
No kidding.
Yeah, so it would get bad.
Oh, dude.
After the dragonflies hatch, then like August, it's like one of the most beautiful places on the planet.
I got you. So how long were you in Alaska?
So we moved up there when I was about 4. I was there till I went away to college at UC Davis when I was 18.
Okay.
So my entire childhood, pretty much.
Nice. UC's a nice school too.
Yeah, so I went to both UC schools. I wrestled at UC Davis for undergrad, and then I stayed in California, went to UCLA for law school. So it was excellent schools. Definitely a very different experience than for a kid growing up in suburban Alaska.
No, absolutely. And if you don't mind my asking, why did you choose law school or be an attorney as a profession?
So it's kind of funny. So I actually wanted to go into philosophy. I absolutely loved philosophy. I had started taking college classes in philosophy when I was 16. I just that's what I wanted to major in. But my parents were like, "You're a white, straight, conservative Christian male. You're not getting hired by any university in this country."
Well, now there may be some truth to that.
So they were like, "Well, you got to figure out something a little more, there's better job opportunities." So I decided to go to law school, and I haven't regretted that. I got my second year there. I started interning for the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office in the Hardcore Gang Division, and I just absolutely loved prosecution. And the number one thing my boss out there told me was the nice thing about being a prosecutor is you have a tremendous amount of power to do the right thing every single day.
I mean, that's true. That's true. And hats off to you for going into prosecution. I had considered law school at a very early age, but I decided to go off into cybercrime, as we all know, and we know how that ended up. The Hardcore Gang Division. What was that like, man?
So it was tremendously eye-opening. Like I said, where I grew up, you were more afraid of bears and moose. And so going down and getting to do ride-alongs with detectives in South Central LA, it was like something out of a movie where it's they're showing me the Crip neighborhoods and the blood neighborhoods and who the shot callers are and stuff like that, and telling me all these just mind-boggling horror stories of 14-year-olds getting initiated into gangs, and to do it they have to execute their best friend, stuff like that. Mind-numbing stories that unfortunately a lot of people don't realize that stuff happens all around the U.S. Even here in Southwest Michigan, we've got unbelievable juvenile crime and things like that, and it frequently happens in pockets, so people are lots of times unaware of what's going on in their own communities, partially because law enforcement historically has done such a good job taking care of it and keeping people isolated from crime affecting their everyday lives.
I was reading an article about Polk County, Florida, and a 12-year-old had been arrested for armed robbery, and the arrest was the 38th time that this 12-year-old had been arrested for property crimes, violent crimes, what have you. You mentioned juveniles. Joining the gang like that, just your opinion. Why are these individuals at these early ages reaching out and joining these gangs?
And so again, I want to clarify too that none of these opinions that I'm stating reflect my employer in any way.
No, absolutely.
It's 100% my own opinions. And so I've had the opportunity to work sort of at every level of the criminal justice system, where I've worked with juveniles, so kids as young as 10 who are starting to commit retail frauds or malicious destruction of property, little kid things. And then abuse, neglect, CPS, so kids who are getting taken away from abusive parents. So I've seen multiple families where their kids are growing up in abusive situations, going on into juvenile crime, and then now they're in adult court and committing adult felonies. The big thing, particularly for gangs, when you're living in an environment that's unstable, which is where most of these kids are coming from and why they're drawn into gang life, it offers you prestige. It offers you an ability to enhance your credibility in the community. So all of a sudden people respect you. You may have been nobody last year, and now you're with this gang, you're running around with a weapon. People are scared of you. Lots of times there's girls that are now attracted to you because you're powerful and you're influential. People are afraid of you. So again, it offers a sense of community. It offers a sense of power. It offers opportunities to advance. You can rise within power in the gangs and things like that. And then it gives you a sense of family and stability. You know what the rules are. You've got people that have your back no matter what. And a lot of these kids have come from unstable environments where nobody had their back for a long time. So there's a lot of attractive things about getting into criminal street gangs. Essentially they prey upon youth that don't have a lot of other opportunities. And so I'm definitely in favor of trying to do what we can to help these communities have more opportunities and stability for growth and counseling and things like that. I'm definitely not a just lock everybody away.
No,
away
not
the key.
at all.
I think that's ridiculous. But again, there's a lot of aspects of that lifestyle that are attractive to people coming from unstable backgrounds.
And then that's, I agree. I've never been associated with a gang. When I went to prison, when I went to prison, I was met at the door by the treasurer of the Aryan Brotherhood. And the guy asked me, he's like, how many more white guys came in? And I told him. And then he was like, what are you in here for? And I told him, and I got my ass in trouble for telling him that because they thought I was a pedophile because I said computer crimes. And took him a while to figure out that I was not. But this kid, let me backtrack. He was not at that point a member of the Aryan Brotherhood. He was I guess you call it prospecting with them. And he was not a bad kid. I call him a kid. He was, in his 20s. He was not a bad guy. But it was evident that his entire life, he had never belonged to anything. So one day I walked into the unit, and this guy, I call him a kid. I'm gonna keep calling him a kid. This kid had gotten himself a tattoo. He had been accepted in. He was now the treasurer of the Brotherhood, and the tattoo was on his stomach. It was this big swastika, and it said, "Even on my worst day, I'm still white." And he's out of prison now. I've not spoken to him or anything like that. But that sense of not belonging to anything and just wanting to belong to something and joining something like that in order to get that sense of community, family, whatever. I don't get it, Rory. I really don't. I don't understand that.
Yeah, and that's, again, in a lot of ways, it's a completely different subculture that people don't understand.
Yeah.
And that's and I don't have any particularly special insight. Again, this is just kind of my observations from seeing this over the last decade or so. And, but yeah, so there's an entirely different culture in the way that they are approaching, the way they look at things, and the way they will take minor insults, and all of a sudden that's like a life offense where we're going to pull guns on each other and shoot at each other over something that doesn't make sense outside of that social circle.
Right. And
it's even the same thing when people are in jails. It's shocking how many of them are actually still planning crimes while they're locked up.
Yeah, there is, and we're going to get into that here. I want to ask one more question on that. Because I'm really interested in juveniles. I really am, because of my history. When these kids are going through the system like this, how many of them stop their actions and really get out of that path toward a life of crime, compared to those who just simply keep on trucking?
That's a tough one. I was actually in juvenile court this morning. I can't comment on the particulars of those cases because they're not closed yet. I can talk about cases that are done and gone, but unfortunately, lots of times when you get a kid coming into the system, it's pretty quick to be able to spot hey, this kid's got a chance, they've got opportunities. With a little bit of course correction, we can get them on the right path. And a lot of that frequently has to do with their parents in the home and how supportive they are of getting them the counseling or drug rehab or whatever it is that they really need to turn away from the path they're on. And then there's some kids who, by the time they get into the system, they're already neck deep committing felonies. They're running with kids who are their friends are in prison. Those kids are going to prison soon. They're recruiting these younger kids who are now hanging out with them, where you're getting 13, 14, 15-year-olds who are driving around the middle of the night with a bunch of loaded firearms.
Right.
And I was actually, I was talking with the judge I was in front of today, who's been doing it longer than I have, but juvenile crime has changed dramatically in the last 5 years.
Right.
When I first did my juvenile rotation a couple of years ago, we would maybe have 1 or 2 gun cases a year, and it was a huge deal. It was we couldn't believe that these 16-year-olds, there would be a group of 4 of them, they had 1 gun. And now it's a couple times a week, we're seeing kids as young as 13, 12 who are running around with loaded firearms, brandishing them at people. They're usually driving around in stolen cars.
Right.
So, just the car theft, the amount of weapons available to these juveniles has just absolutely skyrocketed the last few years. And law enforcement and the courts are kind of reeling from it, honestly, because the ramp up in crime and violence has surpassed what a lot of our resources that are available. So it's it's a very hard thing to deal with right now. There's not a lot of easy answers for it because it has changed so drastically the last few years.
Right. So, and you alluded to this a minute ago. These kids, these gang members, it's not just gang members, but you get arrested, you get in jail. And I'm going to tell you my story, and we can talk about that. with the product that you're talking about too, and why you developed it. But so I got arrested February 8th of 2005. FBI arrested me, and within 45 minutes, Secret Service comes in. They take over the investigation. They let me sit in the county jail for about 3 months. I get out, go to work for the Secret Service, and I am the idiot that continues to break the law from inside Secret Services for the next 10 months until they find out about it. I take off on a cross-country crime spree, steal $600,000 in the space of 4 months, wind up on the United States Most Wanted list, get arrested, go to prison, escape prison, get arrested again, serve out my time. So the reason I bring this up, when I was committing crime inside of the Secret Service offices, that point that they found out about things, I'm in the office one night. They had an operation called Operation Rolling Stone, which was arresting like 9 or 11 people nationwide that night. And one of the people that they were arresting was a very close associate of mine. His name was Sean Mims. He was in Los Angeles. I think now he was dating Belinda Carlisle's son. I'm not sure if he still is or not. But they rounded up Sean Mims. He was in an apartment. The apartment manager comes out as they're putting him in the vehicle, and he was like, hey, I don't know what went on here last night, but Sean last night had a U-Haul truck, and he loaded up all kinds of stuff. And it turns out the stuff he loaded up was all the evidence the Secret Service needed to prosecute the kid. So they come back to me, and they're like, we need you to take a polygraph. And I was like, I'm not taking a polygraph. Called my lawyer. He was like, well, you don't have to. I was like, well, good. He's like, well, if you don't have to, they're going to throw you back in jail. And I'm like, well, bad. And he was like, well, have you done anything? And I was like, yes. And then he was like, well, you could always try to pass the polygraph. And I was like, okay. So needless to say, I did not pass the polygraph. They revoked the bond. I knew that they were going to search the apartment that I was living in Columbia, South Carolina. I had family on the outside, but of course, once you're in jail, the only phones that you've got are those phones that are monitored all the time. And back then, each inmate would have a specific PIN that you would use. That way it would catalog that it was you making the phone call. And you know, the clever guys, they would swap pins with each other. So that would mess up law enforcement, hopefully at that point in time. So of course I gave my call to an associate of mine, and I was like, hey, it would be really good if you went in my apartment and got all this shit out of there before they search it. And needless to say, that phone call was recorded because they were paying really close attention to me, and they found everything that they needed to find to give me 7.5 years ultimately in prison. I remembered that. I still remember that. And I remembered at that county jail, you said at your county jail, maybe 100 people working there. At the county jail in Columbia, South Carolina, far fewer than that. It was horribly overcrowded. There's absolutely no way that human beings could monitor and go through every single phone call. Because I'm going to tell you, when you first got arrested, anytime you could get to a phone, you were on the phone trying to get your bond, trying to tell people what to do. If you were running a criminal business like I was, you were definitely trying to continue to run your business from behind there. I saw men behind that were inmates that were doing that. I saw men that were still threatening their girlfriends. All kinds of things, trying to intimidate witnesses, just a host of other things. And like I said, I saw your technology, WireTap tech. And I was like, man, that's a nifty product right there. So why don't we talk about those prisoners' phone calls a little bit?
Yeah, so and that stretches all the way back to when I was interning in Los Angeles. One of the jobs they would have the interns do was monitor phone calls. We had 50 interns just for that division, and we probably listened to a couple thousand hours over the summer.
Right.
And on one of the cases I was assigned to, we caught a gangster that was planning to murder the single eyewitness in his case. He was talking to his girlfriend. She was getting money together. They were hiring a hitman, so he was talking to the guy that was going to hire the hitman. They got the money to him. He was going to buy a gun. Fortunately, he just bought weed and ran off with it, so they didn't actually get the witness.
Which is pretty common too.
I'll never forget the quote though, because his girlfriend was talking to him saying like, hey, should we really be talking about this over these phones? Like they're recording this. And he said, bitch, I've been in and out of this jail for 15 years and they've never caught me once on these phones. And
Except this one time.
So I burst out laughing when I heard that. And so yeah, that added extra charges. He ended up getting convicted and it was all good. But it's funny just hearing you say like, yeah, we switch pins. We were still planning stuff all the time. We know all that too. We just don't have anywhere near the manpower. I mean, I think almost every single felony domestic violence case where the guys are locked up, we know they're calling their girlfriends and telling them not to testify or threatening them or saying, think about the kids. All of this stuff's illegal. That's another felony.
Right.
So
yeah, I saw that. I spent a lot of time, as you know, before you go off to prison, you spend a lot of time in county jails. I spent a lot of time in county jails, and I saw a lot of domestic abuse cases. And you're absolutely right. Those guys continue to torment, their partner. They continue, if they can't call them directly, they'll call family members or they'll get someone to call them, and they're constantly on the phone, just bam, bam, bam. Tell her not to go. Tell her I love her. Tell her not to go. Tell her she better not do this. Tell her I'll kick her ass. That kind of stuff.
Exactly. And so it was back in 2019 that I got inspired to found WireTap. The company's called WireTap. Our website is WireTap Tech because WireTap.com wasn't available.
Gotcha.
And one of my buddies was prosecuting a murder case. The defendant had made 7,000 phone calls.
7,000?
7,000. He'd been in there for 9 months, made 7,000 phone calls. And my buddy made this offhand. He made this offhand comment to me that was like, why can't I hit Control F and just search for the words in these calls and see if he mentions a gun or the witness's name or whatever? And for some reason, that thought just struck with me. Like, why can't we do that?
Right.
So I went to the coffee shop next to the courthouse, started researching, and I was like, I've realized that this technology actually was available. It was called natural language processing. Obviously, it was 2019, so artificial intelligence wasn't quite as buzzy as it is now. But like, I saw that was a burgeoning technology too, the ability to have computers not only listen, transcribe, but also analyze it for evidence.
Right.
And so I was like, so my next thought was like, well, I'd love to use something like that. So I started researching, like, are there any companies that provide this? And there just weren't. There was one
companies.
I ended up later finding that there was one large company that does it, and but it's very expensive. It's hard to get a hold of them. I couldn't use it. And I knew our jail wouldn't be able to afford it. And I'm not trashing that company or anything like that. They have a different business model than what I do. But I was like, I want something I could sign up and use right now. Yeah. And so I ended up I'm not a programmer. I had no interest in tech or anything like that, but I hate inefficiency. And so I was just like, you know what, this is something that has to be done. This could save millions of hours a year. And particularly law enforcement's understaffed right now. So the ability to save man hours and save time and save money I think is just a huge opportunity. And so, yeah, now we've got a program that you can plug like 5, 10, 15 hours of jail calls in. They transcribe all at the same time. So you can plug in 10 hours of audio. It'll all be transcribed in about 5 to 10 minutes.
Nice.
And then our AI analysis takes about 2 or 3 seconds after that to see. And we've got it basically programmed to flag keywords and things like that. So if they're talking about witnesses coming into court or not coming in to testify or subpoenas, anything that could have relevance, or if they're mentioning guns, drugs, anything like that, those calls will get flagged. And we have a little evidence notification that will pop up and say, hey, check out this transcript. They're talking about witnesses, they're talking about guns, whatever. So there's little summaries of each of the calls as well.
That's nice.
And so I mean, it's a huge time saver. We're still a very young company. We've got users in I think 5 different states right now. Okay. And most of them are individual users. We don't have a ton of large agencies, although now that the product's getting better and better from all the feedback we're getting from detectives and analysts, now we're getting contacted by agencies who are wanting to use it. So it's we're excited for some hopefully some really big growth here, because I think it's going to save a tremendous amount of time, tremendous amount of money. It's like 1/4 the price on an hour per hour basis versus having a human sit and listen to it.
That's nice.
Except, I mean, yeah, you could analyze 5 hours of calls in less than half of the time of this podcast and probably find evidence if it's like a DV case or something where they're talking about the case.
So let me ask you, when I was at Big Spring, West Texas, there was a case where guys were using the phone, moving heroin. And instead of saying heroin, they used the word soy sauce. So and AI should absolutely be able to pick up on these type of anomalies as well. Does your program do that already, where some sort of weird semantic usage is flagged at that point, then a human comes back in and use it?
Yep. So we're working on getting the AI to recognize abnormal usage patterns. That's a very difficult concept with the state of AI right now. But we have a manual search function. So if you know that your local guys use local slang, you can actually search for that. So, I mean, we've got a little search bar. It'll search across all of the transcripts that you've loaded into a particular case. So, like we had this one guy out, I think he was out of Indiana, but he was booked in our local jail, and he was selling guns. Okay. And he kept calling his mom every day saying, hey, like, have you sold my PlayStations yet? Sold my PlayStations yet? And they end up figuring out like he's not selling PlayStations. And
that's AK-47s. That's what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the big things too that I really want my program to be is I want it to be simple to learn. Law enforcement, I hate it whenever they introduce a new tech program and it's like, all right, you're going to take half a day for training to learn this. It's like, this should be simple enough, like you can sign up and just intuitively, like if you have any basic computer skills, you can learn how to use it just by looking at it. But also I want it like to be instantly deployable. Like anyone in the country could sign up right now and start using it. And I want it to be priced at a point where like it's powerful and valuable enough that large agencies in New York and Miami, Chicago, whatever want to use it. But it's also priced enough that like a single sheriff's office in Wyoming, if they get a horrible case and they want to monitor all these guys' calls, they could sign up and use it too. So it's a little bit of a different business model where it's sort of an indie hacker business model where it's very cheap. We're not taking any funding or anything like that. We're not targeting massive contracts. It's like, no, here's this tool. You can sign up, use it, simple. And then it's pay on an hour by hour basis, or you can purchase bulk hours in advance and they just never expire.
I like it. I like that. I mean, I really do. And just so people understand, I mean, we're talking about not every criminal out there is an opportunist. All right. A lot of crime is a business. And when you take one of these individuals off the street, that does not mean that the business shuts down. The business continues. And if that guy is a shot caller, if he's one of the leaders, oftentimes he's going to continue to try to lead that business. And it becomes very important to have those communication channels. And we've seen, you see the movies where the lawyer carries messages back and forth. The phone calls are really the most important aspect. There's a reason that guards, and I was at a prison where this happened, guards sell prepaid cell phones to other inmates, and that $40 cell phone that's at Walmart will run you $1,000 if you're an inmate behind the fence. And they don't buy that so that they can watch YouTube. They buy it because they're committing crime and because they're scared that these phone calls are being recorded. And they are. And you mentioned something, that idea that the guy said, bitch, I've been doing this for years and I've not been caught yet. Well, he knows, there's so many calls going through here. It's impossible for human beings to go through every single one. That's exactly what happened with me committing crime inside Secret Service offices. I knew that. We didn't have scrapers back then. All the data every single night went on a DVD, on a spindle. I knew, hey, there's no way a human being is going to go through that stuff. They can't. And I don't think a lot of people really appreciate that criminals, we typically are not dumbasses. We figure out how to do some shit every now and then. And your product, man, I got to tell you, I was really impressed just reading the idea about it. And now that you've told me what it is, I'm like, yeah, that's going to have an effect. Absolutely, it will.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, again, our only goal is just, I want to help catch bad guys. And I think that we really, with the current state of technology and AI, government's got to get faster at catching these guys. We got to get faster at implementing new tools because things are changing so fast and criminals are innovating thousands of times faster than law enforcement possibly can. And so they're trying new things. They're trying all this generative AI and they just keep trying it over and over again until they get something that they're going to make money off of. They're going to hurt people. They're going to be using this technology to commit crimes faster than law enforcement can keep up. So I think having little kind of even micro innovations like this, like get convictions on people who are confessing right now, and we're literally just missing it because we don't have the technology or the manpower to listen to them.
I agree. So let me ask you this, and this I know for a fact, because I've served time with these guys, I know for a fact that at some point, one of these people who you've recorded his phone call and you've caught him saying some suspicious shit that's going to get him more time, he's going to scream violation of privacy. He's going to scream, you're not allowed to use that. He's going to scream all kinds of things that really don't matter. So what about privacy concerns about that? What about the real concerns of attorney-client privileges, things like that?
attorney-client privileges are supposed to be monitored by the jails. They're not supposed to record any of the conversations with the attorneys. They've usually got private lines or private conference rooms and things set up. So none of those calls that fall under the "this is being recorded and monitored" message, those conversations should not be happening with their attorneys.
Okay.
And thankfully, the privacy issues have actually already been very, very well litigated because we've been using jail calls for years. They waive their privacy rights because they're told beforehand, like, hey, for the security of this institution, this is being recorded. And at that point, you still choose to engage in the call. Both parties have then consented to waiving their privacy for that, for the security of the jail purposes. And defendants bring that up every year. There's almost always some type of civil lawsuit that, like, hey, this violates their privacy. It's like, well, your guy was bringing drugs into the jail. That's a serious safety violation for the deputies living there, for the other defendants or inmates living there. That's unfortunately, that's part of the process when you're convicted of a crime or when you're accused to have committed a crime and held there on probable cause. Like, you do waive some of your privacy rights. So that's not an issue. I mean, we're essentially just a screening tool. There's no additional violation of privacy in any way, shape, or form, because that's already been dealt with on the fact that they've waived their privacy rights in the jail calls.
Gotcha. Okay. And I just wanted to ask, because I honestly didn't know. And
that's a great question.
I keep going back to the way that I felt when I got locked up and I knew that I had evidence in that apartment. And the only way that I could get a message out to someone was if they were going to visit, and they weren't, not before the apartment was searched, or if I used that phone to tell someone to go and get it. And you mentioned it just a second ago. You give up that right to privacy. Yeah, I absolutely knew that those phone calls were being monitored. Absolutely, I knew that. But I was rolling the die, hoping that they weren't going to listen to my phone call, that they didn't have time to do that. And the ability, and let's be honest, I mean, that's not just for recorded calls. It's for a lot of different types of financial crimes that are out there as well. And I'm sure it's that way for drug trafficking and all that. You're operating because you understand that, hey, there just isn't enough law enforcement to handle everybody. For you being able to do that, again, I'm very impressed by that.
I think you had kind of alluded to it earlier in the show too. I mean, it's a fact that there's evil in this world. Yeah. There's evil in our communities, and we need law enforcement around to help keep us safe from everything from financial crimes all the way through murder, domestic violence, or whatever it is. And so, I mean, it's crucial that law enforcement have not only the financial resources and technological resources, but I mean, also the moral support. It's a very, very difficult profession. And again, I'm sorry for my soapbox on this stuff.
No, you're good.
I feel very passionately about it. And it's like, these are the people who are keeping us safe.
Right.
These are the ones who are out there in the streets every night risking taking a bullet so that we can all sleep safely in our homes. And so it's just something I don't think can be said enough, that like we need to support law enforcement, and we need to be able to combat the people that are willing to hurt other people in order to keep our society safe.
No, I agree. And I want to thank you for coming. I wanted to go down one more pathway with you, because it's just important to me. Do you get a lot of fulfillment with prosecuting on that side? I just have to think you have to, with being able to help give closure to victims and things like that.
That's absolutely. I mean, it's sometimes it can be unbelievably brutal when you lose like a really tough case. And right. I mean, I've lost some big cases in my career. I've won some big ones. Yeah, being able to comfort and let like victims know, particularly on serious cases like CSCs or other assaults and things like that, and just let them know, like, look, I'm going to do my absolute best to make sure that you're safe, to make sure that this defendant is held accountable for the harm right. they've caused. Yeah, it's a tremendously fulfilling job, and that's. Unfortunately, it seems like a lot of people are caught up on the money. You can always make more money as a private defense attorney, but I get to go home every day and I get to tell my kids, like, you know what, I'm trying to make sure that you guys are safe. I'm trying to make sure everyone else is safe and make sure that the bad guys are not going to hurt anybody.
Well, yeah. Do you ever, like in my industry, I'm cybersecurity and cybercrime, and I get, there are times I get a lot of apathy, man. That it's not going to change, that, it's getting worse every single day. Do you ever get that feeling where you're at or not?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, like a lot of people don't even understand like how, like what prosecutors' role is in the justice system, honestly. Yeah. Like when I speak to people that work in completely unrelated fields, they're like, oh, so do you like protect the defendants, or are you on the other side? Like, what does that mean? There's definitely a lot of discouragement right now among law enforcement with the state of crime, with the state of the laws being passed, just kind of reducing punishments. There's been lots of, actually, I think earlier you had the California retail fraud stuff. That was that law was passed right when I was interning with the Yuba County office that I ended up working for. So I mean, I was like right in the middle of when that was being passed, and like my boss was going and pleading with the governor to not pass it at the time. And
yeah, because it's insane.
So, I actually kind of come back sometimes to the movie Seven. Is one of my favorite movies with Morgan Freeman, Brad Pitt, and
it's a good one.
At the end, where he closes the film with like, "The world's a decent place and it's worth fighting for," and he says like, "Well, I at least believe the last part." Like I do think the world is a decent place. I do think it's worth fighting for, and I'm glad that I've been able to spend my career in this field, and I plan on continuing in that.
I think you're right. I think a lot of people don't understand the prosecutor's role. When I was a bad guy, when I was that active criminal, law enforcement as a whole, they were assholes. And it's amazing that when one stops breaking the law, that they stop being assholes at that point in time. You know? But I say that kind of in jest, but there's truth in that. I mean, it's the realization of the work that not only law enforcement does, but the prosecutor's department does. It's not that I've never seen, back then, they're out to get me. I have never seen that. What I have seen is just that pursuit of truth across the board. And if you have victimized someone, then there are consequences for your actions. I've got a lot of respect for you, man. I've got a lot of respect for the judicial system overall. I look back at what happened with me, and I'm like, honestly, I should have gotten more time than I did. I'm grateful that I didn't. Looking back now, as I was going through it, I was like, oh, everything's unfair. There's no justice here whatsoever. But, looking back with my case, it may be anecdotal, but with my case, I look back and I was like, you know what? They were fair. They were right. They didn't lie at all. They didn't manipulate anything. They simply told the truth, and it was just a truth that I did not want to hear at that point in time. But I just want you to know I absolutely respect what you do. I've got a lot of respect for you working in the hardcore gang division, with you not going toward the defense, because, yeah, I'm well aware that's where the most money is. But for you not going toward that, for you sitting there and doing the right damn thing every day. That's how I end my show. I'm going to end it here in just a couple of minutes, but it speaks highly of human beings that give up that quick run for cash and profit to just do the right thing and help out other human beings. And that's something that you're doing. That's something that you've done with this product, WireTap. I would absolutely recommend that jails please start using this, because if you think that you can do this job yourself, you can't. You can't. Inmates know that you can't go through everything, and they're willing to take the gamble that you're not going to catch them, and typically you're not if there's enough inmates and not enough manpower there. So please use a product like WireTap. As Rory said, it's the cheapest there. It's outstanding with what it does. And I'm not giving a plug. I don't get paid, but I'm just telling the truth of what is happening behind the fence. And Rory, I'm going to close things out. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing what this product does, sharing some of your story as well. I can't thank you enough, man, truly.
Thank you so much, Brett. I have had just a fantastic time. Like I said at the start of the show, it's been an absolute honor to speak with you. I have great respect for how you've turned your life around, and I'm super glad you're on the good guys side again. And hopefully we'll get to stay in touch and talk again sometime. No, absolutely. If anyone wants to reach out to you or find out more about WireTap, could you please tell us how to do that? Yeah, so you can go to our website at wiretaptech.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Rory McBride, RORYMCBRYDE. You can also email me at wiretap.llc@gmail.com. Again, I'm there for anything you might need to help you with your cases. So thanks again, Brett. Thank you, Rory. I appreciate it. So that was Rory McBride. We start the show by saying that criminals come in all shapes and sizes. They all have criminal thoughts at the end of the day, and we do. I say we because I still call myself a criminal. I just don't break the law anymore. You have to understand that being a criminal is not a 9-to-5 job. It is a lifestyle.
It is something that takes place 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When I was committing crime, that was my primary function in life. Every single thing else took a back seat. So when you're arresting someone and you've got that individual behind bars, he's housed in a jail, in a prison, what have you, that criminal mindset is still there because, again, this has not been a job. This has been a lifestyle. This is something that is you. You are a criminal. When you're like that, it takes a long time to understand that you don't control anything anymore. And if you're given avenues where you can still maintain control, phones, for example, you will do that always. There's a reason that you have that hierarchy in prison that I spoke about earlier. That hierarchy allows inmates to victimize other inmates because that happens every single day as well. If you're allowed a communication source that you can reach people outside of the fence, it allows you to victimize those people as well. It allows you to continue to control your crimes, your criminal empire, if you will. So a product like Rory has come up with, WireTap, is an outstanding product because it cuts that communication short. You add that with a lot of what we're seeing behind prison walls right now of items that actually block cell phone signals, and all of a sudden you've got that prisoner that's cut off almost entirely from control of the outside world. So he can no longer victimize people. He can no longer control criminal movements from outside the fence. So again, anybody that's listening to this, please look up Rory McBride. Pay attention to WireTap because this is a product that is absolutely needed in our society, especially with incarceration. The numbers continue to explode, manpower continuing to decline, calls for defunding, everything else like that. Just because you're defunding police or law enforcement does not mean that crime is going to drop. Crime will explode if there are not people that are making sure that people behave properly. My name is Brett Johnson. This is Criminal Thoughts. We are closing out the show. How do we close it out? Close it out the same way every single day. Stay safe, stay secure, stay vigilant. More importantly, at the end of the day, just do the right damn thing. I'm Brett Johnson. This is Criminal Thoughts. Thank you so much for tuning in.